Now, this might come as a shock, but I've just witnessed the greatest piece of fiction I've ever seen be created. This fiction is unbelievable. It is, without a doubt, the greatest podcast in history. It dwarfs every single piece of fiction there's ever been made. Of course, I'm talking about the TuAh podcast. The TuAh podcast is literally the greatest podcast in human history. It's made over 2 million users. It's had over TuAh jillion users. It is literally the greatest podcast in human history. There is more watchers in the TuAh podcast than there is people in the world. Basically, I'm saying the TuAh podcast is the greatest podcast in the world. The greatest piece of fiction that's ever been made. Like, it's worth dying for. It's worth giving up a life for. It's worth giving up your Make-A-Wish child for to be on the TuAh podcast. Do whatever you can to get on the TuAh podcast. It is the greatest podcast we've ever seen. Now, obviously, putting all the jokes aside, the TuAh podcast obviously is horrible. It absolutely just sucks. Like, I listened to halfway of the first episode, and I immediately turned it off halfway through because, holy hell, is the TuAh podcast terrible. Like, it just, objectively, it sucks. And everyone knows that. Like, everyone knows that it objectively sucks as a podcast because what the hell are you going to expect from it? It is, not only is it very, I'm trying to figure out what it is. Like, it's very predictable what they talk about. Sex preferences, sex, and of course, the TuAh meme. Like, it is probably the most predictable podcast I think I've ever seen. Because, like I said, more than 80% of the podcast, halfway through, more than 80% of the podcast is just them going on about the TuAh meme or sex preferences. And, obviously, no one really wants to hear that, honestly. Unless you're a female or something, I don't know, but unless you, like, want to hear a whole podcast talking about sex preferences or something. But, obviously, the podcast sucks. Like, it objectively just sucks. A lot of the stuff they're saying, it just feels like it's so forced. A lot of the times, like, you're just, like, getting so bored because all they're talking about is just preferences of how they view men. And there's also another dude in there who's just, like, just there just to say every now and then, like, oh yeah, no, that's wrong. That's not how men are. That's wrong. Like, that's pretty much his entire role there. And, yeah, and then the other time, they're just going on about the TuAh meme, talking about how, what would happen if Haley wasn't the one who said the TuAh meme, and it was someone else who said the TuAh meme. And they're, like, talking about how, oh, I don't think I would be able to handle it. No, I couldn't handle it. And then, of course, them talking about how to say the TuAh meme, of course, and then there's them trying to, like, say other types of ways with the TuAh meme, like I think they're calling it shit TuAh and fart TuAh or something. I don't know. It's just something stupid. And then, of course, there's the weird glaze they have over Jake Paul. Like, for some reason, there's this really weird glaze that Haley Welch gives to Jake Paul, where she talks about her experience with Jake, and she's like, "Oh, that's a man. Like, that is not no little boy. That's a man. Like, Jake Paul is nothing but a man." Like, just, like, actual just weird glaze over the guy. Like, she's acting like Jake Paul's, like, the manliest man of all men. Like, she's acting like, when it comes to men, no man is above Jake Paul. Which, like, I guarantee you, no one thinks that. And, yeah, it's just weird, honestly. It's a very weird podcast. I haven't seen the second episode, nor have I finished halfway through. I just highly doubt I'm going to finish it. And it's obviously terrible. A terrible podcast, but, of course, the memes. Like, the TuAh meme. Or I'm saying it wrong. The TuAh podcast is something to die for, obviously. Like, everyone, like, literally, it's worth giving up a life for to be on the TuAh podcast, clearly. And obviously, all jokes aside, it's a terrible podcast. And everyone knows that. But, of course, memes. And, yeah, that's really about it, honestly. I just wanted to talk about it real quick because it's obviously a terrible podcast, but, you know, because of the memes, it is the greatest podcast of all time because of memes. The greatest piece of fiction of all time. But, yeah, besides that, it sucks. Obviously, it sucks. That's about it. I'm out of here.